Good afternoon. Welcome to WASA Distance Education Center and PLAR History. So we're into the third week of Term 1A. It's still not too late to register for the 2025-26 school year. Everyone who registers for the school year will be entered into our raffle draw. So you have to apply on or before September 30th to qualify to be into the raffle. And registering is easy. You can contact your local DEC. You can scan the QR code. We have been circulating the QR code on our Facebook page, which is the WASA Distance Education New. Or you can go to our link at wasaregistration.ca or call us at 807-737-1488. You can also contact our education counselors. We have Mary, who is dedicated to PLAR, and we also have Michelle, so they can help you choose the courses that you need to graduate or earn your OSSD, which is the Ontario Secondary School Diploma. So don't forget, tomorrow we are visiting Wapakika on September 16th. So that's me, Mary, and Bonnie. We will be at the Resource Center starting at 11 a.m. So if you want to register or reapply, drop by. Also, students who were working on their culminating, and if you need help or have questions, go ahead and stop by at the Resource Center. And as I just mentioned, since I'll be traveling to Wapakika on Tuesday, today's class, Monday, September 15th, that's on right now from 1 to 2 p.m., will be aired tomorrow during my regular 11 to 12 time slot. So tomorrow from 11 to 12, it will be this class that I'm broadcasting right now. So this way we're not missing a class and we don't have to make up a class. Students who have already registered or reapplied, remember you can choose to complete the key questions from the lessons, or you can choose to take the culminating activity. Now the culminating activity is an open book test. So that means that when you get the culminating activity, everything that you need to answer the questions in the culminating activity will be there. So this is a good option if you want to challenge yourself. So the culminating will check how well you understand the material from the lessons. So remember, you might have just one culminating to complete. So if you don't have the PLAR, so if you don't have the science, whether the grade 9 or 10 science, then you will be required to do the PLAR science culminating. So it depends. If you're a student that has fewer than 16 grade 9, 10 credits, then you can sign up for PLAR. Also, you have to be 18 by the end of this school year. So if you're not 18 yet and you want to sign up for PLAR and you don't have 16 grade 9, 10 credits, then please make sure to contact the office. Now, for those of you, again, who registered or reapplied, and you have chosen to complete the key questions, you have 3 lessons to complete for the PLAR history. Everything that you need in order to contact me will be on the cover page of the lessons. It's also on the study guide. You will see the WASA studio number, the radio 91.9 FM. So that's the local radio. So if you're in Sioux Lookout or the surrounding area, you can listen to us that way. If not, you can listen to us online. So we have the link there for you to listen. For the Zoom link, there's my Zoom link. It shows you my meeting ID and the passcode, the numbers in the office for you to call, the fax number if you decide to fax your work, also my email, and my Facebook or work Facebook profile is also there, plus our YouTube and our WASA registration link. If you have previous versions of these lessons, so if you have the 2024-25, I will accept the submitted work there as well. So you're looking now at the mark sheet for students who have chosen to complete the lessons. We did up to key question 9 on Thursday, so we're hoping to finish lesson 1 today so that we can get started. Uh, we can get started in lesson 2. And then here's the mark sheet for the culminating activity. So students who are not doing the lessons and have chosen to do the culminating, this is what it looks like. Again, you have the option if you have already finished a lesson, or maybe you even completed 3 or 4 key questions and you've decided that you would rather take the culminating activity. That's up to you. You'll be given the culminating. There are 3 sections for PLAR history. The titles will be different for different versions, meaning there's a version A, a version B, or a version C. So this one is version B. In section A, it's about women and work. In section B, it's about Canada and World War I, and then section C is about French-English relations. I believe version C is about political concerns of women. So you can see there's a different material you'll be reading for different sections or versions of the culminating. So it will tell you whether you passed, so whether you're successful. 50% and above is the minimum, so 50% is the minimum grade. So if you get 50%, that means you pass the culminating. And then you can work on your other culminatings, or if that's the only one that you need to do, then we will give you the senior PLAR, and then you can start working on your senior courses. So again, if you have any questions about completing your grade 9-10 and working on your senior PLAR and senior courses, contact our counselors. Our YouTube channel, this one you can find us online. It features Term 1A classes. It also has other classes there from last year. So if you are working on MEL3E, which is the mathematics for work and everyday life, and you are needing extra help, so check it out and hit the subscribe button. Again, you can use this as support while you're working through your key questions or culminating activity. When you subscribe, any new videos that are uploaded, it will give you a notification that there's new material or new videos being uploaded on the channel. If you don't have Wi-Fi or your internet is not working, you can also request a USB of classes. So we provide you with a USB. You can just click and then open the lesson, and then you can listen and view the classes. So it's organized by subject. So in this case, it's PLAR history. It gives you the lesson number, so lesson 3, and then it provides the key questions that's discussed within that class. So in that case, key questions 37 to 41. If you're needing an email for school, you can request for your nnecschools.org. Some of you already have this email, but maybe you haven't used it in a while, or maybe you forgot your password. Let us know. I can reset it. So if you contact me, I can reset it. If you contact Bonnie, she can reset it. Also, we're able to activate your email if you'd like. Okay, it's fairly simple. Takes no more than a minute to reset your password. When you're trying to get in, and if it says to you that you don't have access to this account, make sure that you sign out of all accounts. Okay, especially if you haven't been using it, your laptop, or maybe if you're using your phone, it will already have an account associated with it. So if you want to use your nnecschools.org, make sure you sign out of all accounts first, and then access it that way. All right, so ways to submit your work for marking. So again, if you're doing the culminating or if you're working on your key questions, different ways you can submit your work so that we can mark it. You can use your iPhone Notes app. So when you're using your iPhone Notes app, you can open the Notes app on your iPhone. You simply tap the camera icon and then you can choose to scan the documents. When you're scanning each page of your work, do not hit save until you've scanned the number of pages you want to send in. You can also take a picture, so you can use your camera, your phone's camera or your iPad to take a clear picture of your work. And that just means that making sure to double check if you can't read it, that means we can't read it either. Okay, so make sure you just, double check that we can read what you're sending. And you can send that picture directly through Facebook Messenger. And another option is emailing. So you can email your work, you can attach your scanned document or your picture to an email. When you're emailing it, make sure you're sending it to studentwork@nnec.on.ca and then CC to the teacher that's marking your work, so we know that, to expect the work that's coming from you. So in the event that student work doesn't get it, we know that we also have a copy of it. You can also share it through Google Docs. So you open your assignment in Google Docs, or you can start creating a Google Doc sheet and then write your answers there. You can simply click on the share button. So you can see that on the top right of your document. So in the box that appears, all you have to do is type your teacher's email. So in this case, you type in my email, and then you can set the setting on editor if you want, or you can even set it on for view, which means that I can see what you have written there. Then you can click send to your teacher, and then we'll then have access to your document. A couple more ways you can just scan or have your DEC fax it for you. You can drop it off at WASA. So if you're within the Sioux Lookout area, we have a WASA outdoor mailbox. It's on the side entrance, or you can ring the doorbell and just drop it off. And again, if you have other concerns or questions, don't hesitate to contact the office or contact me. Okay, from our last class in lesson 1, we talked about the causes of war on page 18, also conscription on page 19. We discussed participation, and we did a spotlight on Francis Pega Magabao, and we did key questions 5 to 9. So today we will look at Canada's military role, and then after the war, and then we'll talk about the 20s and 30s, the Great Depression in particular, and then finally Canadian women and work in the 20th century. That's on page 26 and 27. So hopefully we'll get to the last 7 questions of lesson 1, which is key questions 10 to 18. Okay, quick review from our last class. We talked about World War I. It began in 1914 after the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria-Hungary. And because Canada was still a colony of Britain, so it was ruled by Britain, it was automatically pulled into the war when Britain joined. Many Canadians supported the war effort, but French Canadians were unhappy because they felt that it was not their war. Okay, they didn't feel connected to Britain's cause. We also discussed the contributions of Indigenous soldiers, especially Francis Pega Magabao. Okay, so if you're following along, turn to page 22, Canada's military role in World War I. Okay, some of the battles that Canadian soldiers uh, fought. One of them was a big battle in France in 1915. Now, in this battle, this was again significant because Germany used a new deadly weapon. They used chlorine gas. So, chlorine gas burned the eyes, nose, and lungs of anyone nearby. If you did the PLAR science, we talked about, in lesson 3, we talked about chemistry, and we discussed that chlorine, okay, is a deadly gas. Also, Canada's first major victory was at the Battle of Vimy Ridge. This is where Canadian soldiers fought bravely, and they were awarded 4 Victoria Crosses. Another important one was a group in the Canadian military was called the Canadian Corps. Also, Canadian soldiers fought against the Triple Entente, and then during these battles, soldiers had to climb out of their trenches and cross a dangerous area called No Man's Land. Now, it was referred to as No Man's Land because it was full of barbed wire and flying bullets, making it nearly impossible to survive. It was called this because no one could control it. Now, on the bottom of the slide here, you can see life in the trenches. You can tell the types of garments the soldiers wore, the conditions, the sleeping area. You can see what some of the soldiers were doing, keeping guard. And you can see that, it's a dangerous time for the soldiers because of the situation that they're in with all the bullets flying about. But it gives you an illustration of what it looks like in the trenches. So Canadians also won battles in the air, so not just by land. They also won battles that's fought in the air. Billy Bishop was Canada's top fighter pilot. He fought in at least 170 battles, and he shot down 72 German planes. These air battles were called dogfights, where planes tried to attack each other from behind, like fighting dogs. In 1917, Bishop had a dogfight with a famous Red Baron. Neither pilot won, but Bishop proved he was strong and skilled fighter. So again, you can see some pictures. There's a picture there of Billy Bishop on the left-hand side, and then you can see some pictures of the planes that were in the air fighting. Okay, let's look at some key questions. When you're doing your key questions, okay, keep in mind not to use the internet or Wi-Fi to search for answers. If you add extra information from online sources, you could lose marks. Now, you can add extra information, especially if it's asking for your opinion. Okay, let's look at key question. So key question 9 talked about details about Francis Pega-Magabo. So that one's fairly simple. You just go back to your lesson book, and on page 21, there's a full page about Francis. So you just pick 3 that you want. Okay, so we actually did those already. So here we go. Okay, after the war. Okay, that's page 23. So after the war, Canadians helped the Triple Alliance defeat Germany and the Triple Entente. The war ended, so the war was over November 11th, 1918. The Treaty of Versailles was signed on June 28th, 1919. Now, this treaty was the treaty included a guilt clause, and the guilt clause blamed Germany for causing the war and made them pay a heavy penalty. So, what were the penalties? Well, they had to give back the land it had taken, they had to pay damages, and allow troops from other countries to stay in Germany just to make sure that it was being done. So, the Treaty of Versailles had territorial, military, financial, and general terms. So, the first one for territorial, after World War I, Germany lost a lot of land because of the treaty. It took away a lot of Germany's land, like France, Poland, Belgium, Denmark, and Czechoslovakia. They gained territory, whereas Germany lost all its colonies. And the Saar region was controlled by the League of Nations. So these losses made Germany weaker, both economically and militarily. Also, under military loss, it reduced Germany's military power. Its army was limited to 100,000 soldiers with no air tanks, air force, submarines, and only a small navy, and the Rhineland area was made a demilitarized zone with Allied troops stationed nearby for 15 years. Okay, so that was loss for them. Financial, Germany's economy suffered greatly after losing important industrial land, including coal-rich regions like the Saar and Upper Silesia. The reparations and the ban on uniting with Austria were meant to keep Germany weak and prevent it from becoming more powerful. So after the war, Canada grew from a small British colony to an equal partner in the Imperial Conference. The conference met every few years until World War II. It was meant to strengthen ties between Britain and its allies, as well as talk about defense. The world also took notice of the bravery and skill of Canadian soldiers. The Canadian economy grew during the war with many new factories and manufacturing plants being built. So after the war, Europe needed help rebuilding and saw Canadian resources like raw materials and food as important. And Canada's navy also grew. So this helped increase trade of goods from other countries. So after the war, in 1919, to help prevent future wars, countries created an organization called the League of Nations. So the League's goals, so why were they created? Well, it was to reduce weapons, stop future wars, solve problems through talks, and improve global welfare. So we know that it didn't stop future wars because we had World War II, but at the time that was their goal. Okay? They didn't want to repeat the mass slaughter of the war. They said that the war that ended all wars was the First World War, and that countries needed to find a place to meet and collaborate to find peaceful solutions in their disputes. Okay, so that's why the League of Nations was created. Okay, key question 10, what was the income war tax? So when you're trying to complete the key question, make sure you're answering in a full sentence. So the income war tax, and then tell me what that is. Key question 11, we just talked about it. What is the guilt clause? So this is the first part of the question. And the second part is, what did Germany have to do after the war? Okay, so the guilt clause, first tell me what that is. And then Germany had to do what after the war? And then key question 12, describe. So I just want you to tell me in a couple of sentences. Describe the League of Nations. That's the first part. So tell me a little bit about it. And then its purpose. So why did they create the League of Nations? What was it supposed to do? So the League of Nations, you tell me what it is, and then its purpose, or it was meant to what? If you come across the support questions, so if you're looking at the support question number 3, it says answer the following questions. Remember that the suggested answers are at the end of the lesson. So you can try the support questions, and then you can check yourself to see if you have answered the question properly. Okay, we're now on the last section of lesson 1. So the 20s and 30s, so 1920 to 1939. So during most of the 1920s, Canada experienced a time of excitement. They also experienced prosperity and good times. There was a rise in industry, and more people moved to cities. Many families started owning things like a telephone, automobile, and radio. Electricity also made daily life easier and became more common. Now, at the same time that this was happening, Canada became more independent. So, independent meaning they're not needing uh, Britain anymore. So, Canada became more independent from Britain. So, what caused the Industrial Revolution? We said that life got easier in the 20s. There were advances in technology. People were living longer. And we said this already, that people were moving to cities away from farms. The economy was experiencing good times. And the 1920s was also a decade of change for women. Let's see some of the highlights. There were 9 million cars in 1919. By 1929, there were 26 million cars. There were 60,000 radios in the 20s. In 1920. By 1929, there were 10 million radios. In 1915, there were 10 million telephones. By 1930, there were 20 million telephones. For every one refrigerator in 1921, in 1929, there were 167 refrigerators. So you can see the difference with the increase industry, urbanization. People were feeling very good at that time. There were also big advancements in medicine and technology. One important discovery was when Banting and Best, they discovered insulin in 1922, which helped people with diabetes live longer. People also stopped dying from pneumonia and other respiratory conditions because these could now be treated. However, women still fought for equal rights, and many working class people struggled to make enough money for food and other needs. Now, most people enjoyed this prosperity until the stock market crashed of 1929. So you can see here, there's a picture of Best and Banting. Some other well-known inventions of the decade included Band-Aids, Kleenex, and zippers. New food products introduced during the 20s were Welch's grape jelly, Wrigley's chewing gum, and the Eskimo ice cream pie. Other things, hair dryer, recliner, electric shaver, Band-Aid, pop-up toaster. Okay, these were all inventions around that time. Okay, the Great Depression. This started in October 1929 with the stock market crash in New York. So the value of many companies' stocks dropped, and millions of people suddenly lost their jobs. So some people, they believe that the depression happened because companies were making more products than people need. So, companies are making things that people were not buying. So thousands of companies went bankrupt, and they had to fire their workers. So nearly 1/3 of all Canadians lost their jobs. So this is the newspaper. It says New York, Tuesday, October 29th, 1929. This is Black Tuesday, the stock market crash of 1929. Okay, that's a resource. So again, here are the highlights of the causes of the depression was overproduction. So we talked about companies creating products a lot more than what people were buying. So because of improvements in technology, more goods were being produced and companies expanded. But eventually people stopped buying and companies had to close. The second thing was the inflation. So the prices just kept going up and wages did not keep up with the cost of living. Okay, the other reason is buying on credit. So buying stocks on margin. So that means that people were paying 10% down and then they were paying the rest later. Bank loans were being given. Installment buying, where a portion would be paid at the time of purchase and then the rest was to be paid later. And so as you can see, where people lost their jobs, when they bought things on credit, even if they paid 10% down, without having a job, they couldn't pay the rest later. Same thing with installment buying. They paid a portion of it at the time that they bought it, but then they couldn't pay for it later because they didn't have a job. So yeah, no income, so could not pay their bills. Eventually, people just sold their homes and land. So this installment buying, this became popular in the 20s for everything from vacuum cleaners to houses. And as I mentioned, because of the Great Depression, many lost their property when they couldn't pay off their loans. The other sector that was affected was farmers. So farming also changed during this time. Other countries started producing more grains. So this hurt the farming industry in Canada. On top of that, there was a severe drought in Western Canada, and it just lasted for years. So millions of grasshoppers appeared and ate much of the crops. Okay, so here's another picture from that time. You can see people lining up for free coffee and donuts for the unemployed. So the drought that happened, it lasted for 6 years. So you have farmers losing their farms. The other factor was the distribution of wealth. So farmers were losing money, so they could not afford to buy. You could see on the bottom of the page or screen there, this is figure 8.6. So farmers who stayed on their farms had to rely on luck and creativity to survive. So if they couldn't afford fuel for their cars, what they did was they used their farm animals to pull them instead. These makeshift vehicles were called Bennett buggies, and it was named after the Prime Minister at the time, R.B. Bennett. He also set up camps for homeless men. Uh, this way they could get 3 meals a day and a bed to sleep in at night, and the men had to work in exchange for this help. For single men and women, they traveled all over the country looking for work. One of the ways they found to get or to travel all over the country was by riding the rails. So they couldn't pay for a ticket on the train, so what they would do is they would just hop on. Okay, they would ride the rails in search of work or adventure. So during the Great Depression, many people had no income. They couldn't pay for their bills. They had to sell their homes and land. The Depression reached its worst point in 1933, and then the world finally began recovering through the rest of the 1930s. So again, you can see some pictures here. Um, Here's some men looking for work, and they just have the signs around their neck there. It says, wanted a decent job, by a decent man, family war veteran, paying on home, college trained. Here's another one, says, wanted a decent job. So this is how they advertised to receive work. So Bennett created work camps for single men. They were like slave camps. They worked for 20 cents a day. Over 170,000 men spent some time in these camps. You could also check out the link. It's called The Great Depression Crash Course, U.S. History number 33. Okay, we can check out key questions 13 to 15. Key question 13 says, explain in your own words why you think the Great Depression happened. So after reading about the Great Depression on page 24, tell me in your own words, just briefly, a couple of sentences, why you think the Great Depression happened. So this is why you think. So you could start off your answer by I think. Okay, the Great Depression happened because, then you would continue on with your answer. Okay, it's what you think based on what you have read. And then the second, or key question 14, so it relates to key question 13. Do you think we could ever have another Great Depression? So first, you should respond with if you think, whether you think yes, we could have another one, or no, I don't think we could have another one. So if you say yes, then tell me why you think we could have another one, or if you say no, again, you have to tell me why. So two parts of that question. And then finally, key question 15, it says describe two difficulties faced by farmers during the Great Depression. So we talked about some of the things that the farmers were faced with during the Great Depression. I just want you to tell me two difficulties. So you have choices or pick two of them. So two difficulties faced by farmers. So 1, 2. Okay, the last section here is about Canadian women and work in the 20th century. So in the early 1900s, men and women had very different work experiences. So many people believed that women shouldn't have jobs unless it was absolutely necessary. So expectations, what did people expect for men to do? Well, they expected men would work to earn money and support their families, and they expected women to stay home to take care of the household or farm. Women's work were considered cooking, cleaning, and caring for the family, and this was not paid even though it was very important. Now, if they worked for money, so if women had to work for money, People also expected or believed they should only work certain jobs. Before 1900, most working women had jobs in other people's homes. They worked as live-in servants. They did jobs like cleaning, cooking, taking care of children. They had to be available all the time, so day and night, which meant that they had very little freedom or privacy. Now, if they had jobs, there were very few job options. Many jobs were not available to them because they did not have the same education as men. Women were not allowed to work in fields like law, medicine, or engineering. So they were also discouraged from going to post secondary. So going to university was not an option for them. So people believed that a woman's role was to stay at home. In the early 1900s, more Canadian women needed to work for money, and then more jobs became available. So factories opened after the 1900s. So women were finding work in places like textile factories, food canning and processing plants, also jobs as mail clerks, telephone operators. So the women found that these jobs were better than working as a live-in servants because they could come home or go home to their families at the end of the day. So many consider the turning point in history of women's rights at work to be the First World War because that was when women entered the workforce to replace enlisted men. So you can see some pictures here. These are women packing olives in Hamilton. This was in the 1920s. Or women at a sewing factory. So again, these are pictures from that time. Okay, for political concerns of women in the early 20th century, before and after the war, women in Canada focused on two major political issues. The first one was banning alcohol, which is called prohibition, and then secondly, gaining the right to vote in elections. Women who supported prohibition formed groups because they wanted to convince the government to change alcohol laws. This movement was called the Temperance Movement, and it was very popular across Canada. Every major city had an office, and there were hundreds of local groups. Now, besides banning alcohol, these women also wanted to improve Canadian society, so they pushed for better hospitals, schools, and prisons. So why banning alcohol? Well, people thought alcohol was behind a lot of society's problems, so they pushed for moderation or even quitting altogether. This eventually led to alcohol being banned or prohibited in many parts of Canada. And again, you can see some pictures there at that time. This one was Elk Lake, Ontario during Prohibition. You can see some alcohol barrels being thrown out, and then you have the Sunday school group by the Hillhurst Presbyterian Sunday School group in Calgary, and it's their banner reads, "Help us, we would close the saloon." So again, these are pictures of that time. All provinces tried prohibition. However, this did not stop alcohol abuse. Instead, it led to illegal alcohol sales. It created a secret market and a growing business for bootleggers and smugglers. During Prohibition, many women realized it was not making Canadian society better as they had hoped. They also noticed that government officials ignored many of their ideas for improving the country. So on the bottom of the screen here, you can see some ways people tried to get around Prohibition. So again, we talked about bootleggers. These are people who illegally made or sold alcohol. They used what was called cow shoes, okay, to hide their tracks from the police. These were special wooden blocks shaped like a cow hooves, and then they attached to their shoes. So when they walked, their footprints looked like cow tracks instead of human footprints. So it made it hard for police to track them down. So what the women did was they believed that the only way that the politicians would listen to them was they had to win the right to vote. So to gain suffrage or the right to vote, women used different strategies. They held demonstrations, they collected signatures on petitions, they formed societies for political equality, and they wrote newspaper articles and letters to magazines. Women won the right to vote in provincial elections in different years. So in 1916, you had Manitoba, Alberta, Saskatchewan, and BC. Ontario followed along in 1917, then Nova Scotia in 1918, New Brunswick in 1919, and you have PEI in 1922. 1940 for Quebec, they were the last province to allow women to vote. And yes, we're missing Newfoundland because Newfoundland was not yet part of Canada at the time. For federal elections, which is across Canada, some women won the right to vote in 1917, and by 1918, all women over 21 won the right to vote. Okay, when you turn to page 28, you will see a timeline. And this just shows, and you can just read this yourself. These are the rights to women in Canada. So it starts off with 1890s, where women couldn't own farms on the prairies, and right up to, we went as far as the 2000s. We have in 2008, Leona Aglukkaq became the first Inuit woman to hold a senior cabinet position as Minister of Health. So you could just go through that list on your own there. And what we will do is we'll finish up with, for today's class, key question 16. What I want you to do there is when you're looking at that chart, there are opportunities for men and women in the early 1900s. So you can see on the left-hand section is education, employment, and family roles. Okay, so that's the left column. On the right-hand side, you see men, and then you see women. So what you have to do there is you tell me what kind of opportunities men had, and then as opposed to what women had. So for education, for example, men could attend universities. Okay, they were allowed to do that. For education, women were not allowed. Okay, or they were not expected. So that's what you have to do here. So you would use the headings education, employment, and family roles. Key question 17, why did women feel it was important for them to get to vote? Or why did they feel it was important to gain suffrage? That means having the right to vote. So we talked about that. I'll give you a hint regarding politicians. So remember, they wanted to ban alcohol, but politicians weren't listening to them. And then the final question in lesson 1 is, in your opinion, that means what do you think? How are women's rights today compared to the early years in 1900? So in one paragraph, I want you to tell me how women's rights and roles have changed or maybe you don't feel it has changed in the areas of education, employment, and family roles. You can use your chart on page 16. So if you do that correctly, you can see, how are men back in the early 1900s, the opportunities for men differ from the women back then. Okay, so we're going to stop here, and a quick reminder to students that tomorrow the class for PLAR history from 11 to 12. Okay, this is the class that you will hear for tomorrow. Any students listening or students interested in Wapakika, please join us tomorrow at the Resource Center. We should get there by 10:30 and have everything set up by 11 a.m. Okay, that's it for today. Thank you for joining me. Miigwech.